Hi, everyone. I'm Jess, and I'm the content manager here at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding boot camps for them. If you haven't used Course Report yet, you definitely should check it out. On Course Report, you can research the best coding boot camps as well as all kinds of technical skills boot camps from all over the world. You can find out which coding languages to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your very own boot camp experience. Today, I'm so happy to have Simon Greganis joining us to talk about his coding bootcamp experience at Codesmith's New York City campus. So Simon graduated from Codesmith's New York City campus in 2022 and is now a web applications developer at Arc'teryx. So thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Simon. First off, I'd love to know what prompted you to make a career change into tech recently?
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on, Jess. It's uh, it's a good question, I guess. That a lot of people are debating. Depending on kind of the backgrounds, kind of where they're coming from. Personally, I've always had a passion on the technical side of things. In terms of just getting under the hood as to like how things work. From like a hardware engineering standpoint. I never really had any formal education in that. Like I went to school for business. I ran and founded a startup. And I think in the process of being a founder and scaling that startup from, like an early kind of pre-seed company to a seed stage business that we ended up selling, that's really kind of where I fell in love with tech even more so, right? Just from like a startup ecosystem, the value that that skill set has, both in being able to kind of build and create things from scratch, which was definitely like really, really well aligned with my own personal values, all the way to obviously the avenues from like a career perspective that it offers you and kind of personal growth. It is definitely a journey that you never stop learning within that, and that was something that appealed to me. So it was really just kind of it felt like the right fit, both aligning personally and, like I said, it was kind of a point of discovery for me once I was actually a startup founder that I'm like, wow, I really need to kind of commit and pursue this industry more.
Hmm. And Simon, when you were looking for your own coding bootcamp experience, were you specifically looking for in-person learning?
I was. It was kind of an interesting time, right? Because I was actually just looking at the calendar of, when I did this program, it was a year ago, almost to the date that I started with the on-site program, and related to the Codesmith kind of bootcamp program and the immersive programs. There's kind of a decent amount of prep work and kind of the interview side that goes into it beforehand. So when I was kind of doing the research across all of the different programs, both in like post-secondary institutions, boot camps, kind of self-taught paths, and so on. I did value like the in-person experience. Some of my other professional experience works in with other tech companies and tech startups across Canada. So with 500 Global, we're one of the largest venture capital firms globally, investing in early stage and seed stage tech startups. And I had the amazing experience in setting up kind of from the ground up our accelerator program, mentoring and fostering tech startup founders from all over Canada, and seeing the difference in our own curriculum between in-person components and virtual components in terms of like styles of learning, mentorship, coaching. I was just very much drawn to the in-person component, both from like a community standpoint and from really just being able to like maximize my time in the program. And I kind of fell into like a pretty tough gap because basically a lot of the programs, and when I mean a lot, like 99% were still like virtual only. You're
Mm-hmm.
like just coming into COVID. A lot of programs didn't want to go back to doing in person. So there wasn't a lot necessarily to choose from, but I did want to find the right fit of an environment that I could be in person, that I could ask questions and kind of undertake like an intensive program essentially.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, it's so many boot camps are now just online, especially since the pandemic, they didn't reopen their in-person campuses. That said, there are still quite a few New York City in-person boot camp programs. So what set Codesmith apart from the rest of those?
You have to make a determination based on just like your personal values and like what fits with you individually. Like I'd say number one, kind of like as a learner, so like the learning style, so understanding what goes into the curriculum, understanding kind of what where the value adds are. Like I don't think um there's going to be like a one size fits all for everyone. Like it is very, very different depending on like your time commitments, like your financial resources as well. And Codesmith just aligned with mine, right? And then to elaborate on that a little bit more, number one, like I was looking for like the hardest curriculum. Like I wanted to find the program that was like absolutely by far, kind of without a doubt, up there in terms of like a challenging curriculum. Like I didn't want to go into a program and be coming out at like, like a junior level, and not having like valid experience that could replicate what you actually do in the industry, both in terms of like pursuing my passion, entering, kind of becoming a tech founder again, and building and innovating on my own terms, but also kind of within the corporate landscape and within the corporate industry. So like having a challenging program is extremely important to me, and I'm definitely someone that like prioritizes like personal growth and like ongoing learning. I'm always kind of setting, call it like challenging outcomes or goals for myself. So that aligned well in terms of what I was seeing from like alumni feedback, what I was seeing from kind of like online research. And then the other side was like understanding the importance in early stages of my career, both being a tech founder, as well as working in venture capital, is like the strength of like a strong network, a strength of like alumni and other individuals to speak to. And I found that with Codesmith as well, both being able to like speak to alumni of the program prior to going into it, obviously like post Codesmith as well, being able to lean on them. I wanted to kind of find that balance. So I'd say those were kind of the two things that really stood out for me, was like the strength of the alumni network, as well as like the challenging curriculum that I knew would get me to, a good place that I could kind of continue the momentum, but wouldn't need to, spend another year on like the self-taught journey after the fact.
And when you were applying to Codesmith, or even just scoping it out, did you visit like in person the campus, or attend any of their events at New York City before like day one of the boot camp?
So I didn't. If there was an opportunity to do so, like I probably would have. It's just that literally wasn't even an option for me. It didn't exist. I was I was part of the first cohort that was back in person. So literally, like the campus was ready, the week before our cohort essentially kicked off. Like obviously now, with this recording coming out, we're just like in a different state. They've run way more cohorts and so on. There's more kind of networking events. There's more kind of opportunities to take advantage of, what is this environment going to be a right fit for me? I was kind of flying in blind. So I would definitely take advantage of like going for some of the hard part sessions or some of the networking events, and just like see if it's the right fit, both from like a community standpoint, the learning style aspect, just the environment that you're going to be in. You're going to spend a lot of time there. Yeah. I definitely ended up spending way more time than I even thought that I was going to there. So you just want to make sure that's like well aligned. So yeah, if I was to go back and have that opportunity, I definitely would. But just in my situation with it being the first cohort back, I didn't.
And as you were applying to Codesmith, did you consider doing the online immersive rather than the New York City campus, or did you really want to be in person and like move to New York City to do this?
Yeah, so I was originally accepted to, this is a while ago now, but the part-time remote immersive program, mainly due to the fact that, like I said, I was coming out of a career as a founder, having sold my business, sold my equity in that business, and then kind of transitioning into the world of venture capital. So like I had, like a fairly extensive amount of like previous employment experience, managerial experience, and can kind of continue down my career path. So there was definitely like an option of pursuing it from like a part-time capacity, but I just felt that stretching that out over, don't necessarily like quote me on this, you'd have to double check, but I want to say it was like a 9 month or like a 12-month program. Like it was a long program. I felt that some of the content, some of the learnings might be like a little diluted over that time. Obviously for other people, they needed that income to be able to participate in the program. I was in a situation where, I had savings set aside to be able to kind of complete the in-person program in kind of its full intensity. So I chose to go that route once again, kind of for the challenge that it was, as well as for trying to kind of just maximize my time as opposed to kind of being 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think it'd be pretty tough to kind of juggle that. Not to say that it's not doable, but it was just not, kind of like I said, not the right fit for me. So I did have that consideration of going virtual, but saw those in-person benefits as far as like the networking and kind of the hands-on kind of learning experience as like an additional value add that I wouldn't get in a virtual environment.
So let's dive into what it was actually like to learn in person at Codesmith. What was a typical day or a typical week like when you were learning in person on the New York City campus?
Yeah. So I can kind of structure it around like what I did, and then what was like the
Yeah.
Codesmith curriculum and structure too. So because they were like slightly different. Obviously, like you have the flexibility to like really leverage your own time in addition to like the Codesmith structure, which is once again like a benefit of doing it fully immersed, like full-time commitment. So what I kind of took advantage of was data structures and algorithms. I had a like fellow Codesmith cohort member, Jackson Calmback. He ended up becoming like a really, really close friend of mine and was really committed to doing data structures and algorithms with me every single day. So that was he was essentially my partner in crime in doing that. And we did that on top of Codesmith's curriculum. So essentially kind of what our typical day looked like was we would start at around 7 a.m., maybe a little bit earlier, meet up at a coffee shop and do, algorithms and data structures, either like learning principles or just like grinding through various resources online, like Structy, for about 2 hours. And then from that, we would head into like the Codesmith in-person campus and have like a pretty short morning stand up, figure out what like the structure of the day looks like, the plan, the topics that are going to be covered. We'd usually then go into like a hack hour. So, they're providing you either like an approach lecture where you're learning like strategy related to data structures and algorithms, or you're just like solving a problem itself. And then we went into the actual, call it lecture workshop kind of portion of the day, which usually broke out into like, there was an AM and like a PM topic. So something like, learning Node, going through like front-end fundamentals or learning like React, followed by like very structured units. So, pair programming style, you're working through challenges or building projects or, working through like structured technical application of what you just learned, right? So you're definitely spending more time on the application side than you are on like the learning principle side of just like listening to someone lecture or anything like that, right? It was definitely kind of application heavy. Broken up between that, you'd obviously have some time for lunch, dinner, etc. But that's more or less kind of what the average day looked like. There was obviously depending on the week you were in the program, you might have like a solo project or group project or presentations, etc. But your average days of the intense learning structure would kind of follow that stand up hack hour AM topic unit and then PM topic kind of unit.
On like a weekly basis, like how many hours on campus did you feel like you were?
I probably spent around 12 to maybe 14 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then on Saturdays, we would like take a short day. So Jackson and I wouldn't do like our own kind of personal time for data structures and algorithms. So it would be, I want to say like a 6 to 8 hour day kind of thing. And then Sundays were like completely off. So really kind of front loaded the Monday through Friday. As far as like just Codesmith structured curriculum, it was obviously shorter than that. But like I said, I'm usually tacking on at least, 2 hours every single day, Monday through Friday. At the beginning of the program, it was just solely like data structures and algorithms. The later program, it was like the implementation of like their hiring program segments and just like connecting with Codesmith alumni, connecting with other like FANG engineers in the region, either in person or Zoom calls. So it was kind of the balance of both, of just trying to maximize kind of every hour of every day that I had while I was in the city.
Are you like in the classroom the whole time, or are there sort of breakout spaces, study spaces on campus for you to be in?
I'd say you're in the classroom like a fairly short amount of time. Like it just, like I said, when lectures are getting delivered, workshops are getting delivered, you kind of have like an open space, kind of like almost like a co-working space vibe where there's like desks, monitors, and so on, and you're kind of seated with your group or whoever you're pair programming with, etc. So it's kind of a more workspace area, and then areas, kind of little call rooms that you can like pop off to have like a one-on-one call or to like break out and do like a pair programming session, etc. Like I said, the curriculum itself, it's fairly structured around the idea of independence and like problem solving skills. If there's like a core principle that's being taught or a core skill that's gained, it's like not the technical aspect at all whatsoever. It's definitely, becoming an independent um, uh, individual and engineer that's able to effectively like decipher problems and solve them. So that's only going to come through like applying principles that you know very little about or were like recently introduced to. So it was nice to spend less time in the classroom for sure and have more time like out in that open space with other engineers to like work through those problems.
Codesmith obviously has a very rigorous curriculum, as you've talked about. When you needed extra support going through a particular section or a project, what was that either on campus or online support like for you?
Yeah, that's one of the huge benefits, in my opinion, of doing this in person is that you have those supports right there. Like there's somebody that you can just like, walk up to, right? Whether they be fellows, whether they be the lead instructors, you're able to ask questions, have somebody like come over to your monitor or your kind of workspace, answer them, work through them with you, post up next to you. You're able to just like go tap another engineer on the shoulder. You're able to like very quickly learn from others in your cohort as well as from the instructors. So that's very, very difficult to replicate in an online environment. There's obviously attempts to do so related to like breakout rooms, and just hopping into like an open Zoom room to ask questions and so on. But it's those are once again just substitutes to kind of the literally someone stand right next to you and explain a concept and then you not understand it and they quickly grab a whiteboard and you're kind of going back and forth to work through your own technical understanding of this topic or theoretical understanding of this topic. So there was always somebody on hand, like I said, depending on if it was like a hack hour, it might be a fellow. If it was like a major module like learning React for the first time, it would be like a lead instructor. And of course always, like I said, leveraging other engineers in the room. That made a big difference to like my learning experience and was definitely an assumption that I had of why I wanted to do in person. It was great seeing that actually pay off and be the reality after the fact.
Obviously, we were very busy with the Codesmith program, but I'd love to know, what did you end up doing in your downtime since you were in New York City?
There wasn't much downtime, so I'll kind of start with that. But the one thing that I did kind of plan out was that I took Sundays like totally off, especially with adding in like the extra hours during the week. It definitely like takes a toll on you. I'd say like within 6, 7, 8 weeks is kind of when you start to like really feel the impacts of that of just like nonstop going for like 12 to 14 hours a day. It kind of has a snowball effect in terms of its impact. So Sundays were kind of the day that I had dedicated to kind of go out and about. So I was lucky that my wife actually came down with me. So, when we were staying in an Airbnb, she was there, and then we had our small dog as well. So I'd spend some time with her because I'm obviously barely seeing her during the week. And then just exploring the city, kind of doing like your typical like touristy things, or just go to a nice restaurant, check out like a new neighborhood, new region. I traveled to the States like quite a bit, especially for work, both in like VC and being a founder. I just never had the opportunity to like kind of call it live full time in New York. So it was a great opportunity to just kind of take advantage of that. Although like the time was limited, it was always kind of a nice opportunity to like really take your mind off like the nitty gritty like technical aspects, and just like value the time that you have kind of in the city. So yeah, your typical shows, movies, whatever I could do to get my mind off engineering was essentially what I did in my downtime, with that downtime being limited to
Totally.
Sundays after I had a 12-hour sleep.
Oh my goodness. I know your schedule just sounds so intense. Let's switch to talking about the career services. So when you started looking for a job or getting ready for that portion of the program, what did the on-campus career services team do for you?
Quite a bit. So just given the fact that we have like a hiring program, the same intensity that you are learning like technical concepts, to take something like React for the first time, or diving into Node a little bit deeper, right? There's theoretical lectures, there's workshops, there's pair programming components, there's projects, there's working on your open source product with another team of engineers and managing scrums, right? Like there's this high level of intensity, a lot of information to gather, a lot of iteration application. That same thing happens during the hiring program, just around topics related to hiring. So like everything from like technical interview prep, whiteboarding, data structures and algorithms, drafting things like resumes, kind of strategies that are working for, reach out and not, how to connect with recruiters, like basically everything that you can think of related to the job search. We would have like lectures, workshops, pair programmings on, practice sessions to like work through kind of your own narrative and refine that. I will say that a lot of that onus kind of lands on you, that like you have to not only be willing to like iterate and kind of decipher and work through improving kind of your own materials to make you to basically present and come up with the best narrative possible, but there is no like one size fits all approach, especially to like their hiring program, because every person is going to have, a different background. Like me being a tech founder and having managerial experience isn't the same as somebody presenting their narrative as like, this tech job is like their very first role out of like college or university with like a comp sci degree, right? Like just very different backgrounds, narratives, and like how you'll go about the interview process. So it was really nice seeing that like very custom tailored, in the sense that you're able to still digest the information and iterate through it, but like develop your own personal narratives, as opposed to like, when you're learning going back to like React or like a front end framework, where it is more so like blanket knowledge. Obviously, everyone's trying to understand like a commonality, as opposed to hiring, which is a lot more personalized. So that involved both, yourself and the other cohort mates, but it also involved, once again, like the instructors and the fellows, and like the hiring support team, to ensure that your goals are aligned. They want kick-ass outcomes. They want to see you in a place that you're going to thrive and get the most amount of value as possible from like a compensation standpoint. And that's obviously, or maybe not obviously, but that's what I'm assuming you're going for as like an end outcome as well. So that definitely showed during the hiring portion of the program.
Let's talk about your first job that you landed after Codesmith. Were you looking for New York City employers, or were you kind of looking even for remote jobs as well?
Yeah, so in the ideal world, would love to have taken a role there. Unfortunately, with Canadians, the visa situation is like pretty difficult. You do qualify, like if you went to school for computer science, you qualify for a TN visa, and you can basically get it like same day. It's like a fairly easy process. There's no like long wait time or lottery system, etc. It is easy to get it. But if you don't have a background, like so essentially like a degree, so post-secondary studies in the relevant field that you want to work in the US, it is a much more challenging process to get a visa. Not to say that it's not doable, but it's just a lot more difficult. So that did restrict me for towards like looking for roles in Canada in particular. So coming out of like working within like the OS lab scope on my open source product, which was Night Owl, landing at Arc'teryx was kind of my main focus, right? So I was open to remote roles, but ideally I was looking for in-person roles in either Vancouver or Toronto. So I was able to at least kind of like hone in geographically where I was open to moving from, because at the time I was living in Alberta, and kind of finding the right fit in terms of like seniority of role, and kind of being able to grow within that from like a technical standpoint.
So I was wondering if Arc'teryx had ever heard of Codesmith, or if they were interested in your bootcamp experience or the portfolio that you built at bootcamp.
Like I said, just related to like my personal narrative, I didn't really need to present kind of that aspect of my education, because I had professional and managerial work experience. They just wanted to ensure that my technical understanding and experience was where it needed to be. So they didn't care how I got from A to Z, with Z being like my technical understanding as of that date, right? That I can work within their tech stack, understand and work within their daily workflow. If you pursued a self-taught journey that was very disciplined and structured, 12 to 14 hours a day, you're able to work through all those concepts and get to that same point of Z, it would have been fine, right? Nobody really grilled me on any formal education or like how you got there. It was, once again, just that you could do the job, and you could also pass the technical interview and understand their tech stack.
Did you feel Codesmith prepared you well for the technical interview?
Yeah, for sure. For the technical interview that I got there, yes. Like if you were doing a like a FANG level interview, I'd probably say no. Like you would definitely have to do complementary studying like on your own terms. They would get you maybe like 70% of the way there if I had to like really quantify it. I'm someone that obviously like tries to quantify a lot of things, so it's like pretty clear and unambiguous. But that extra 30%, you would have to do self-studying to pass interviews at like Google, Facebook, Stripe, etc.
Mhm.
And that's speaking from experience that I've done mock interviews with the engineers there and kind of went through that interview preparation path as well. But for a company that they're obviously like tech adjacent, so like they're an e-commerce company, so a lot of their innovation relates to facilitating that aspect of their business, but they're not like a SaaS company. So it was a little bit different. But if you are going for FANG, once again, you're having to do your own studying. If you're not, and you're going like anywhere below that tier, I would say, yeah, it was like more than adequate preparation in terms of like just following the DSA that they have built into their curriculum.
Mm. Arc'teryx is such a big company. So I was wondering what team you're working on, and without giving away company secrets, what kinds of projects you're working on there now.
Yeah, for sure. So um, the one point that I'll add is I actually just recently left Arc'teryx
Oh,
to go and work on the creation of my own startup, so my
cool.
own tech startup. So I'm still within working within like the venture capital realm and 500, working with tech founders kind of around Canada. But I'm actually also developing my own tech startup. So at the time that I was at Arc'teryx, I primarily worked within like the guest services and like cloud migration teams. So without going into like an immense amount of detail of like what that kind of entails, a lot of the projects were like anything related to customer facing aspects, right? So whether it be live chat related things, whether it be how we handle customer service, so like integrations within like Salesforce and like our front end framework, as well as work within just web ops as a whole. So triaging like any problems that we had related to like site speed and reliability, all the way down to just like uh, fixes from like a user experience or user interface standpoint related to like our guest checkout experience. So it was fairly broad in terms of like the initial scope of web ops and then moving into like the guest services cloud migration project. But it was primarily like front end focused in terms of the role and working within like their micro front end architecture.
That's awesome, and congrats on starting your own your tech startup. I'd love to know a little bit more. Are you doing the actual like tech components and also being the CEO? Like, what's that like these days?
Yeah, yeah. So as of right now, I am doing both, and that was, you know, portioned towards like the skills that I wanted to develop, kind of pursue that like development path. Obviously, like not at scale as the company grows, but as far as like MVP like iterations go, I obviously have experience being the CEO and like the fundraising investor relations aspects of it, as well as like leading and hiring a team. But being able to add in that added skill set from like a development standpoint was like a big value add that I saw in my career, and being able to like iterate quickly, especially at like an earlier stage tech company, and be able to find the right product market fit. So kind of my vision for the business as it sits today is being able to accomplish that as like a solopreneur, and then, you know, continue to grow the team out from there, as opposed to needing to essentially have like a technical co-founder from day one, essentially on the team or on the ground to like support you in like idea validation. So yeah, that was definitely somewhere that I didn't necessarily like envision that at the time going into Codesmith, but was
Yeah.
something that was like very quickly realized like after the fact, because it goes back to kind of what I had introduced at the like the very beginning of the interview. I think the most important thing that took me too long to realize was like the tie towards you know, your own personal values and your own personal goals. Like it's so easy to get focused on like curriculum and technical aspects and like wanting to aspire to a FANG role, etc. But if you don't just like take that moment for like self-reflection and understand like who you are as a person, like what you value and where you're a good fit, you're gonna end up going down all these like janky paths that may or may not work. So kind of going full circle to the startup path has definitely taught me that.
I love that. So are you using what you learned at Codesmith now as you start up your own new tech startup and build this MVP?
I am for the web app component. I guess obviously there's a lot of nuances from like a mobile app development standpoint. That's not where kind of Codesmith focuses, but yeah, I will say that it wasn't really the technical skills related to like a specific technology
Mm.
that you're going to need on like day to day within your job, right? So if you learn to build, I don't know, the best React apps possible, and that's where you aim to specialize, it's almost irrelevant. Like once you join a company, obviously, if you build it from the ground up and it's like your startup, it's a little bit different. But you're coming into a company that has like a very complicated tech stack with multiple back end and potentially like front end integrations with like a team of developers, tech debt, and all of these other aspects. And there's going to be so many specific nuances to like how you work there versus how you'd work on like your own project, right? To build a clone of an e-commerce site, right? That can ship from multiple warehouses and have, you know, a back end integration with something like Shopify. You'd probably like draft that up in like a weekend and have like a full understanding of it. Maybe not even a weekend, maybe like a day, where, you know, an e-commerce business that's doing like $1 billion in sales a year, it's layer of complexity and different amount of kind of knowledge gap that you're going to need to fill. So that's what's helped me the most, is like learning to become an independent engineer that can kind of think through those problems, use tools, and do research to like understand it and solve it, regardless of it being like web app development or mobile app development or whatever the case may be. And that's what I learned from Codesmith. That was like my big takeaway from doing the immersive program.
So Simon, my last question for you, as we think of incoming students, what do you wish you had known about the in-person learning experience at Codesmith before you enrolled? Any tips?
Maybe this isn't necessarily specific to just like the in-person learning experience. Maybe it's like enrolling at Codesmith as a whole, if that's okay as like an
Yeah.
answer. Is kind of how I would think about it. But um, the the first thing I would definitely wish I had known and would pass on to incoming students was what I mentioned kind of a couple answers ago, of really taking some time for some like introspection and like understanding and defining like your goals, your outcomes, where are you looking to go, what are you looking to kind of get out of it, as opposed to just getting like so bogged down in the details of like different courses and going in Udemy and on YouTube and building projects and building different apps, right? Like understanding what your goals are, and that those might change as time passes on, but trying to have like an outcome focused approach where like you set that goal and you like work backwards and you see, you know, how it is everything that you do day to day going to fit into it. That is definitely something that that I had wished I just spent more time doing, and would have definitely saved me more time kind of throughout the whole process. The other side is really just like understanding um, the not only like the interview process as a whole, but what your role is going to look like at the end of Codesmith. So obviously not necessarily like your dream role, but like your first role, your second role, your third role kind of within the industry, and help you kind of transition and grow down that given career path. I would just say to make sure that you're spending the time also researching and understanding like what that career path is, right? Like if you have opportunities to like shadow at that level or interview people at that level. So whether if your dream is landing a job at a FANG company in the US, or if your dream is like working within a tech startup, get a really good understanding of that, which kind of goes back to my first point of like setting those outcomes and goals. And then once again, work that backwards within like the Codesmith curriculum, because they can help prepare you for like the technical gaps and the technical understanding and position you as a kick-ass engineer, both from like a hiring standpoint and technical, but they're not going to have an understanding of like what outcome is best for you. You need to kind of bring that information to the table. So yeah, those are kind of two things that in person or not, I guess, like whether you do the program virtually or like, definitely two things that stood out for me that I wish I had spent more time doing. So yeah, understanding kind of the outcome and setting those goals at the outset, like well in advance, and then exploring and doing research on those outcomes on the roles that you would essentially like to land and go into, and how can you more effectively like bridge the gap between the two.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I think that's an excellent place to wrap up this Q&A. Thank you so much for sharing your bootcamp experience and your career insights with us today, Simon. And thank you so much to all of you for watching. We're going to be posting a transcript of this video interview on the Course Report blog with contact information for Codesmith, just in case you're interested in applying for one of their upcoming cohorts, either online or in New York City. And in the meantime, follow Course Report on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're a bootcamp alumni, don't forget to post a review of your coding bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone who's thinking of getting into tech today.